Welcome to the Hyperpolyglot Activists. Learn languages, make a difference. My name is Dr. Carlos Ibra Lopez, and today I have the pleasure of speaking to Andreas. Andreas, welcome.
Hola, gracias.
So, my first question for you, Andreas, would be what is your language background and how does it intersect with your research topics?
Okay, that is a huge question. So, my language background, I'll maybe work my way back. Maybe that's easier than going forward. So, I'm originally German, um, but I work with the Scottish Gaelic language in the first instance just now.
Mhm.
I am what's called a video journalist with BBC Alba, the Scottish Gaelic channel, and also radio. So video journalist means I go out, do interviews, record them myself, and edit them also. And at home, I speak Spanish mostly. My wife is from South America,
Mhm.
and my father-in-law though is Italian, so there's that language in the family as well. And in the street, of course, it's mostly English. Although Scotland is a trilingual country, and there's also the Scots language, which is so different to Gaelic, both good and bad, um, as far as the situation is concerned. I'm not suggesting any of the languages are good or bad. Um,
Mhm.
it's really interesting, but there's nowhere you can go and do a summer course in Scots. There are some courses at university level, yes, and there are some tuition in schools. But for an adult like myself, there's nowhere you can go and learn it. So I invented a Scots language summer camp, which is
Mhm.
in fact happening next week. So we're doing it for the third time this year. And yeah, so and then I mean, back in before I got this job, I obviously went to college,
Mhm.
part of the University of the Highlands and Islands now, and studied Scottish Gaelic up to honours degree level. So if you're not familiar with the honours degree system, it's basically a bachelor and a master combined.
Mhm.
And but after that, also did a master in journalism at Edinburgh Napier University. Yeah, but my language interest has gone way back to the days of my school. Um, and So in school, I did uh, English first, then French. And in fact, English and French were my two main subjects. At that point
Mhm.
in German schools, you had to, in high school, you had to choose kind of two main subjects, and mine were English and French. And also spent some time in going to school in France. Um, and I then could manage to lobby and convince the school to teach Russian as a third language.
Mhm.
And Russian as well as Portuguese are the two languages I'm currently regularly practicing with the Polyglot Nation network,
Mhm.
and as well as with HYPIA. And yeah, more recently, I have also learned some other smaller languages, um, not least Northern Frisian, which
Mhm.
is, and to be precise, the dialect called Ferring, spoken on the island of Fär, as
Mhm.
the endonym is, or Föhr in German. And that's a language spoken by 2,000 people. So that's a new challenge there. I'm also on my third attempt currently to learn Mandarin. That seems to be a bit more difficult than Fetting. Yeah, so that's all happening at the moment.
Mhm.
And
Great.
yeah, how does that intersect with my research interests?
Mhm.
So. I've found out over the years that a lot of people, when they find out, because I don't normally boast about it, but when they find out that I speak more than two languages, you always get big eyes and oh wow kind of thing. and I'm always a bit surprised about that. You know, it doesn't seem to me to be something so extraordinary. But then again, in the professional world, I find that it's a very mixed picture, and some employers do seem to value it. At the BBC, we used to have a European current affairs program. It still exists, but has basically been stripped of a lot of its assets. So, and you know, the producers of the program have changed over the years. Some of them thought, yeah, it's a great idea to have a guy on the program who speaks 10 European languages. Others really weren't bothered at all. And, you know, that kind of surprised me when I was clearly able to bring very tangible benefits to the program. Um, so, I wanted to find out a bit why that is and how different employers in different countries deal with this
Mhm.
question. And that's why last year at the Polyglot Gathering, I conducted a workshop, which was preceded by a little survey which I sent out to, I think it was sent out to all the HYPIA members, and I had 65 responses and also some very interesting responses during the workshop. In fact, the interview has just been posted online today.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was able to watch it back, and some of the comments are fascinating, both good and bad. So, um, and yeah, maybe leading on to your last question, how does that intersect with critical polyglot studies? Well, one intersection I think is, and I think you mentioned it before. You know, it's a question I also asked: is does this apply to all languages, or does
Mhm.
it only apply to some? Sorry, this being where any benefits,
Mhm.
i.e., time off, or premiums, i.e., a wee bit more money,
Mhm.
are offered. Does this apply to English, French, and Spanish only, or
Mhm.
would that also apply to Fetting, Northern
Mhm.
Frisian? I can imagine that might be quite difficult for some companies to even assess that ability. So
Mhm.
I think that's something that where there could potentially be a crossover.
Right. Well, let me go question by question. So first, congratulations on the summer teaching initiative concerning Scots. I think that is wonderful.
Thank
A lot
you.
of people in the polyglot community see some deficit and they point out to that deficit, but they rarely work proactively to go and address it themselves. So I think that speaks volume to your coherent position on this. Um, Now, it's also great that you've conducted original research and you got your own data set with 65 participants. That definitely can be used for a future article, especially when it comes to, say, discrimination in the workplace. So we already have something to work with. As to the reasons why that appreciation or lack thereof happens in the workplace, I'm thinking that the BBC might value Scots and say Welsh and say other languages within the UK because of that polity. I'm thinking something similar happens in Spain with Catalan or Galician or so-called co-official languages that are recognized by the Constitution as official yet underneath Spanish, meaning official only in certain circumstances, but there are accommodations for those, say if you need an interpreter in court, etc. So I'm guessing that once you take those languages outside of the UK, it's going to be much more difficult for it to find appreciation in the workplace, or even within the UK, in as much as the workplace is not representative of the nation. Say there's a clear link between the BBC and the UK, whereas there might not be between the local pub in Dublin, Ireland, and Welsh as a language, right? So I think that context is important. I'm thinking about it myself. I work at a modern, quote unquote, modern languages department, right? And not all languages are considered worthy of being labeled modern. And of course, the fact that I speak, say, 7 to 8 languages doesn't really translate into a bigger payment. And that's not even translate into a better consideration. In fact, the opposite might be true. They might think, how come you're a Spanish professor, but you're spending your time perfecting your Russian? Like this is not only not a plus, but it's actually a minus because it detracts from the specialization you could incur with that time.
Absolutely. So two thoughts on that.
Mm,
One on the BBC's appreciation or support of languages, of
mm,
UK languages. Um, well, yes, they are supportive. Some would say very supportive of Welsh. They are supportive of Gaelic with a radio and television channel. The provision for Scots amounts to a series of podcasts in the Scots language. There are no television programs at all,
mhm, mhm.
and there's no regular radio program.
Right.
I mean, other than maybe some presenters using Scots, but this is one of the possibly advantages and disadvantages of Scots that it's on a continuum, it lives on a continuum with English, as they say,
Mm,
i.e., for a lot of people, Scots might be considered more of a dialect because they use a Scots light version, right?
mhm, mhm,
Which is possibly understandable for you and everyone else. But then there are those Scots speakers who speak it as a language, and there you will really struggle. I sometimes still struggle to understand them. Yeah.
mhm.
So, and now I've just forgotten the other point, which I also thought was really interesting, which you just made. Um,
About
remind me.
about all other languages in the workplace in addition to Spanish, say my studying Russian alongside my teaching Spanish.
Yes. So at the polyglot gathering during
Mm,
my workshop, one guy commented that he actually felt he applied for a job somewhere. I think it was in Taiwan, and because he spoke, I don't recall exactly, was it 8 or 10 languages or whatever, he was disqualified because they thought
mm,
he was overqualified,
right.
and they were intimidated. And you know what? I myself, I spoke to a professor at a Scottish university recently about possibly doing a PhD in languages. And the last thing he said to me was, well, well, I'll help you as much as I can, but we'll have to see because they're going to be scared of all your languages.
Right.
So,
Yes, I mean the way you're describing Scots in the BBC sounds a bit like Ladino in Televisión Española, in Spanish television.
hmm
In the sense that
yes.
there is the equivalent of a podcast, which is in this case a radio program. But other than in that radio program, which is like maybe 10 minutes per session, there's no more Ladino on the Spanish television.
hmm
Whereas the situation of Gaelic or Welsh would be more equivalent to Catalan,
hmm
Euskera, etc. And it also reminds me of the dialect to language distinction, right? Because you said because there is a mutual intelligibility between Scots and English, some people consider it a dialect. Same happens with Judeo-Spanish or Ladino. Same happens with German and Yiddish, right?
hmm
And we know from the perspective of critical polyglot studies that one or two language questions, whether this language is a dialect of that language or a different language, in this case, whether Scots is a different language from English instead of a dialect of it, cannot be adjudicated by linguists, qua linguists, because the two criteria that we supposedly have to measure that in turn refer to extra linguistic criteria, meaning political criteria. So the two criteria
Yes.
are mutual intelligibility, as you pointed out,
hmm
and then lexical similarity. But of course, you can accommodate for mutual intelligibility. If you want people to understand what you're saying in Scots, you can just use the words that you anticipate that they will understand knowing English. Whereas if you want
Absolutely.
to make it as different as possible, you can also play that game and find
Yep.
them completely unaware of what you just said, right? We can do the same in Ladino. We can write Judeo-Spanish in Hebrew scripts from the 18th century, and nobody will have a clue. They wouldn't even.
Wow.
It's the same language, right? But you could also say "Estoy aquí en la casa" and make it look almost like Spanish. So
Hmm.
linguistic accommodation is a matter of will. It's not just an objective
Yeah,
measurement,
yeah, yeah.
right? Same with the words you use. I can use a lot of Hebrew and Turkish and Greek words in Ladino so as to confuse people who only speak Spanish, or I can
Hmm.
only draw upon Ibero-Romance languages so as to facilitate people who only the understanding for people who only speak Spanish.
Interesting. Yeah, totally. Hmm.
So both criteria refer to a political action,
Yeah, yeah.
which is the naming of a language, right? Do you consider Serbo-Croatian the same linguistic continuum, or is it Serbian one language and Croatian another one? Well, it just so happens to be the case that once the politics changes because of war, say, then the whether we call this one or two languages changes as well, without the linguistic structure
Yeah,
having changed at all, right?
yeah, 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 totally.
So that's definitely another topic that could be of research interest concerning Scots and English. I remember, if I recall correctly, that there was a famous polemic with the Scots because somebody, in good faith, tried to translate the English Wikipedia into the Scots Wikipedia, but they just
Hmm.
apply like very basic rules of equivalences, and the result was very offensive to the Scots speaking community.
Okay. I must admit I hadn't heard about that one, but yeah, I'm not
Yes.
surprised. Yeah.
So
And
some, yeah.
but yeah, quite often you get these examples, as I'm sure you have many of yourself, but there was one recently where I think it was Glasgow Airport, they put up a sign saying Fáilte, welcome or whatever. But it was a simple thing which showed they had just used Google Translate.
Oh,
Um, the accent on the A was pointing the wrong way, which makes it Irish. So
yeah.
so they'd actually put up a sign in Irish Gaelic at Glasgow Airport. Yeah.
Crazy, yeah. Unfortunately, everybody's as passionate about languages. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Wow, the boldness of it. Yes. And so I think my last question would be, what are any or some specific research publication plans that you have in mind? You spoke about considering a PhD. Have you thought about specific journals? Would you like to publish maybe a book in the future? Are there any outcome/publication research plans that you have in mind?
So, in terms of books, I have just completed a book project which I got an award for. So, an award
Mhm.
not an award of um, that you get for quality, but an award of a little bit of
Okay.
money and
Yes. Mhm.
support.
But
Um,
but but the first one will come later on, right? Once you
I
got the
certainly
money on the
hope
board, then
so.
you got the other award.
Yeah, so and it's currently sitting with a publisher. So but I would like to do a bit more research maybe on this subject that I researched last year, and that I did the little survey about with HYPIA and then the workshop at the Polyglot Gathering. I did feel that it would be nice to see in what ways um, kind of something like best practice could be established,
Mhm.
um, or yeah, how employers that want to hear about this. I guess you'll never be able to force anyone to do anything. Well, unless, in fact, this was something I just watched it back. Um, a lawyer from Luxembourg told us that in Luxembourg, by law, every employer has to give you 2 months to learn a language of your choice. Isn't that great?
Wow,
So yeah,
impressive, yeah. Mhm.
fascinating. So so I think I would like to research a bit more about that. Um, So obviously my sample was not bad, but 65 responses plus maybe another 20 at the gathering is not representative and maybe not big enough. It just gives us an idea of maybe which direction um,
Hmm.
to go. And that's something, if that was of interest to yourselves and this program, then I would like to yeah, do a bit more about that. And I think at this moment, I'm not aiming for a book just yet. I
Hmm.
think, but more in the region of a research article, if that
Right.
sounds acceptable.
Yes. So two things. First, you haven't told us what the book that is already finished is about, like the topic, the area.
Yeah, so it's meant to be a pilgrim's guide. So
Hmm.
there is a pilgrim path here in my area of Scotland, which is not very widely known yet, also although very historical.
Hmm.
And so I've walked this pilgrim path, and I've walked it in the company, although some of this company was virtual, I have to admit, and I do admit that in the book as well, um, with some companions who are telling me about various subjects that are connected um, to this path. Yeah.
Hmm. Great. Impressive. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. And then concerning your article, what I see is that you have data, right? And some people say the numbers speak for themselves. Other people say that there are lies, big lies, and statistics. So
Well,
the truth is probably somewhere in between. But what I mean is
yes.
this. We want ideally to turn that data set into a qualitative discussion of that data set, then have a journal article publication that encapsulates both the quantitative and the qualitative side, and then
Hmm.
you can transform that into social policy, which seems to be the logical conclusion of that research, right?
Absolutely.
To get to have them contact employers and say, hey, this is what I think should be done, but it's not just me who woke up today who thought about this. I actually have a scientific publication to back it up with a data set, with more experiments that can be reproduced in this and this and this direction. So I think one thing reinforces the other. Yes.
That sounds just right. Yeah.
Mm.
That sounds great. And in fact, I just remembered one guy also said that what one of the responses I got was they work in an engineering company, I think in Spain, in fact.
Mhm.
And there was one person at the gathering who said they worked in an engineering company in the US. I had the same experience that the company would only ever consider branching out into markets where they speak the language. And yet,
Uh-huh.
although they knew that he was there or she was there and spoke so many other languages, they never bothered to ask them, him or her, um, whether he or she would help branching out
Right.
into these other markets. So
Right.
So, this tells me several things. It tells me, that languages are obviously important to branch out into new markets, but that companies seem to be hesitant to make that work. So, yeah.
Right. Yes. There is then the issue of legitimacy and authenticity, which, as we know, are processes, right? So there is no such a thing as a legitimate speaker or an authentic speaker, but there are
Mm,
legitimation processes and authentication processes whereby
yeah.
people come to be perceived as legitimate or authentic speakers, and that also affects job searching policies. We know that in a number of countries it is illegal to ask for, I believe in the UK it is, to ask for a native speaker of X language, as
Hmm.
if native speaker was a proficiency level, which as we know is not. And that is also explored by critical polyglot studies, right? So how do you measure
Yes.
proficiency and what scientific as opposed to ideological categories do you use to that effect? And which ones can you actually share in public? Right? One
Hmm.
thing is the reported criteria, and another thing is the actually used criteria. Right?
So interesting. Yes.
Yes, so these conversations need to happen more, and we're glad to have you on HYPIA Research 2.0 to help these bring these questions to the forefront.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
All right, thank you very much, Andreas, and I look forward to working with you.
Yo también. Mucho gusto.
Gracias. All right.